Good Monday afternoon, everybody, and welcome to 2023's first episode of the Lions Grid. I am your host, Kevin Marhine, joined today by Andy. He's back there in the back. I'm sure he'll be making an appearance throughout the show. But today, we're talking about some action and activity that happened on a Sunday yesterday between the Detroit Lions and the Chicago Bears, and sort of what that means here as we head into the last week of the NFL season. Of course, a victory for the Lions did mean they still have a chance at making the playoffs. It's kind of out of their hands, but they are traveling to Lambeau to take on the Packers, and a win there is really all they can do. So they're going to do what they can do and hopefully get a win there. And we'll talk about what else needs to happen in order for them to actually make the playoffs. Because unfortunately, like I said, it's not just a win and go. They are going to need a little bit of help. But before we dive into what is coming up in the next week, let's take a look here at some of the stats from the game this weekend. So this is actually the first time since 2017 the Lions have swept the Bears, and you can see they did it with a convincing 41-10 victory at home against the Bears. Really a solid game across the board, offense, defense, and we'll take a look here at some of the stats for some of the players that really helped seal the deal here. And as we take a look here, of course, Jared Goff, we've talked about it throughout the season about when the Lions went on that great 6-1 run, and now again getting another win here. A big part of that has been Jared Goff's play. You can see 21-29, 255 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a QBR of 133.5. I want to really emphasize the 0 interceptions, and there were no fumbles this week. So once again, you had Jared Goff taking fantastic care of the football, and that's what good teams do. They don't make mistakes, and with Jared Goff at the helm, the Lions really have, in this turnaround of their season, limited the number of turnovers they've had, which has been fantastic because conversely, the defense has been forcing the opposite team, their opponents, to turn the ball over. So when you have a positive turnover differential, you're putting your team in good positions to win games, and the Lions have been capitalizing on those opportunities, and they did that here against the Bears this weekend. But again, Jared Goff sort of leading the way. I know he had 2 touchdown passes to the tight ends, which set a record for the, I think it was like 12 touchdowns on the season for tight ends, which was a Lions record at the position. So, exciting to see them do that, especially considering the fact that they did trade away arguably their number 1 tight end in TJ Hockenson. Brock Wright, if you're a fantasy owner, he hasn't been super consistent. It's not been an every week thing. But these Lions tight ends, even with Hockenson gone, have found a way to contribute to the offense. And we saw that here as Jared Goff looked and took advantage of them against the Bears. Next up, we got to touch on our 2 running backs in this game because, we sort of talked about after last game, where'd they go? Where's this Lions running game? And it was on display at Ford Field against the Bears on Sunday. Jamal Williams, 22 carries, 144 yards and a touchdown. And then if we take a look at his backfield mate here, DeAndre Swift, 11 carries, 78 rushing yards, 4 receptions, 39 yards, and 2 total TDs, 1 in the air and 1 on the ground. It really was a great day for the Lions running back duo. DeAndre Swift averaging 7.1 yards per rush, Jamal Williams averaging 6.5 yards per rush, and then you had Jameson Williams, number 9, the rookie, contributing a 40-yard rush himself. Really saw a positive, real positives out of the rushing attack here, which had been missing for the last few weeks. So, obviously, you don't want to get too excited. The Bears are currently sitting at 3-13, and I believe they currently have the number 2 pick in the draft order. They're not a very good team. So, take it with a grain of salt, but it was nice to see. You would expect, at least then, knowing that the opponent you're going up against isn't the greatest, that it'd be a good game to rebound. And they did that. The running game came back, made an appearance, and hopefully they'll be able to take some of that to Lambeau when they go there this weekend. But really, those were sort of the studs on the offensive side of things. Now, 2 rookies that really showed up on the defensive side of things. You had Aiden Hutchinson, who picked up his 3rd interception of the season. He had 4 total tackles, including half a sack. He's continuing He's the fact that he continues to drop back into coverage and get those interceptions is impressive. But then another guy who's really been coming on strong here lately, James Houston, 3 total tackles, all of them sacks, 2 for total losses, 3 QB hits, and a forced fumble. James Houston has been fantastic for the Detroit Lions. I want to say I saw that he's the first rookie to record 3 sacks in a game since Max Crosby. And you know how good Max Crosby is in Los Angeles for the Raiders, or sorry, Las Vegas for the Raiders. So, if he can continue this play, hopefully into next season, he is going to just be a fantastic find by the Brad Holmes, getting him in when they drafted him, being this late round stud who's really come on here towards the latter half of the season and really been a contributor for the Lions. So a lot of good stuff. And as we mentioned, of course, with the victory here, playoff hopes are still alive. They have to go to Lambeau to take on the dreaded Green Bay Packers. And that game has actually been flexed to the Sunday Night Football spot. So they will know by the time of kickoff if they have a chance of making the playoffs, because sort of the situation at hand, if you are a Lions fan, for them to make the playoffs, unfortunately, with how things have worked out, and the Seahawks having the tiebreaker against the Lions, the Lions need the Seahawks to lose. The Seahawks are taking on the Rams at home. That game kicks off at 4:25, but they will know going before kickoff whether or not they have a chance of still making the playoffs. Now that being said, they can also, I believe, play spoiler, because I'm not sure how everything works out if the Seahawks do somehow no, if the Seahawks lose and the Lions win, the Lions go. So, there could be spoiler in the fact that they could, the Lions beat the Packers don't go. The Seahawks would go if they're victorious. If the Seahawks were to lose, then the Lions would advance to the wild card playoffs. But even if the Seahawks win, which they're playing a Rams team, which not only they're pretty beat up, and obviously the Rams coming off their Super Bowl season, they're definitely not having the type of season that they'd hope for. Baker Mayfield's in for them at the moment. He didn't look great this past week. The Rams are at 5-11. The nice thing is that we do get their first round pick, which is currently projected as the 6th pick in next year's draft. But the downside is we kind of need them to beat the Seahawks to make the playoffs. There's no kind about it. We need them to beat the Seahawks in order to make the playoffs. It doesn't matter if we beat Green Bay at Lambeau, which is not an easy task for the Lions. I believe the Lions have beat the Packers 2 times in my lifetime at Lambeau. They need to get a victory against, or the Rams need to get a victory against the Seahawks for the Lions to have an opportunity. If the Seahawks beat the Rams, that's it. The Lions aren't going. It doesn't matter what they do. So it's kind of there's definitely a glimmer of hope, but there is that little gray sky of knowing that, hey, we really need the Rams to somehow beat the Seahawks. And in a normal year, that might be something that I think could happen. But just with where the Rams are at, Cooper Kupp's out. Their number one wide receiver at the moment is Van Jefferson. Baker Mayfield in his first game out came out and just played a game where it was just pure. He was able to just to will them into victory. But now that things have sort of settled down and he's trying to get established and familiar with the offense and things like that, you can't just run on raw emotion like that. So it seems like an unlikely situation in which the Rams go into Seattle and get a win, with Seattle, of course, wanting to make the playoffs themselves. That's tough. But you know what? Sort of regardless, I expect this Lions team, who is an underdog heading into the game against the Packers at Lambeau. The Packers are favored by 4.5 in that game currently. It's a divisional game against a divisional opponent. You have just swept the Bears, like I said, for the first time since 2017. You split the series with the Vikings, and you've already beaten the Packers once this season. This is your chance to go 5-1 against division opponents, which is a huge thing, and something that the good teams do. They win games against their divisional opponents. That's how you establish yourself in this league. And so, even though the Lions have a unlikely chance of making the playoffs. And I've been saying as they've been on this run that I don't expect them to make the playoffs. The fact that they have been doing quite a bit to make this as close of a run as they can, I certainly give them credit for. But I definitely feel that next year is going to be the season where I'm expecting them to challenge the playoffs, especially because they've been doing a lot of the right things here throughout the end of this season. They've turned it around. They beat the Vikings. They beat the Jets. They beat the Jaguars, who are a team. They beat the Giants, who are in the playoffs. They've beaten playoff teams down the stretch and have looked good. Obviously, they didn't look real good against the Panthers, which if they could have got that win, like I feel they could have, it could have been a much different situation for them heading here into the final week of the season, especially with all the teams ahead of them having lost that week. But unfortunately for the Lions, it is what it is. And so you got this game against the Packers. It's going to be flexed to Sunday Night Football. You're going to know before the game, before kickoff, whether or not you have a chance to make the playoffs or not. It's a small chance because again, you're counting on the Rams to go into Seattle and get the win. With Seattle, of course, having their playoff hopes on the line. A tall ask. If the Lions don't make the playoffs, I don't think the season is disappointing at all. But I would like to see, regardless of if they go to the playoffs or not, I think important to see is them get a victory against this Packers team. Now, the Packers, we'll talk a little bit about more about the matchup for the pregame episode that'll be coming, this weekend. But the Packers aren't as. There was definitely a point in time as a Packers fan where I was really down on the Packers and thought the Lions should be coming in and just smashing them because from the offensive side and defensive side, they were just looking like garbage. They have improved over the past couple of weeks. And with that, I think they're on a 4-game winning streak. So it's sort of changed my expectations heading into that game. But I definitely think this is a game the Lions can win because again they have been playing really well, and I think this is another one of those wins that sort of signals the changing of the tide, the changing of the guard. If they can go into Lambeau and get a win, something they historically have struggled with in my lifetime. Again, I think they've only won 2 games at Lambeau Field since I've been alive, which is 32 years. Um, that's huge. That's huge for them. And I know Dan Campbell has been talking a lot about how there's definitely getting this exposure, whether they make the playoffs or not, is giving guys a lot of experience, getting them used to playing for beating divisional opponents and playing for seeding and things like that. All that great stuff that hopefully will be happening next year. They're getting a lot of that exposure this year, and this is a chance not only to send a division rival, stop them from making the playoffs, but go into a place where you have struggled. And it's not just the Lions, by the way, who have struggled at Lambeau Field. I saw a graphic during the Packers game that said that the Matt LaFleur, the Packers head coach, is like 26-0 or something like that in his career as the Packers head coach during December. Like it is hard to go into Lambeau Field in December and January and get a victory. It's not an easy task. It's cold. Nobody likes to play in that type of cold. It is a bad time. And so if the Lions can somehow do that, go into Lambeau, get a win, stop the Packers from making the playoffs, yeah, unfortunately, if the Rams don't beat the Seahawks, it won't equal a wild card berth. But again, it's them taking steps and doing things that traditionally they haven't done, and really showing that they are a team that has changed, that has the ability in this next season to really compete and really show what they're made of. Because, yeah, unfortunately, you started the season 1-6, and that is what it is. You turned it around with a 6-1 streak. Obviously, we dropped that game to Carolina last week. Not great. But a win against the Packers at Lambeau Field. Again, something you've done twice during my 32 years of existence. That's something to hang your hat on. And, obviously there's a lot of turnover in rosters between years to year, between year to year. So in terms of momentum, I don't put a whole lot of stock on that in terms of the win, but it's one of those wins again that shows as an organization that the Lions are starting to go into new territory that they haven't done before. Beating teams like the Vikings, Jacksonville, the Giants, the Jets, all these teams that are either in the playoffs or on the cusp of the playoffs towards the end of the season, not things the Lions have historically done. So the fact that we're starting to see them win against quality opponents towards the end of the year in these meaningful games, that's obviously we need to see that continue into next season, but it's setting themselves up for really that organizational change, getting rid of that same old Lions, that SOL feel, and really potentially becoming a new team in the NFC to watch out for. And part of that means beating the old guard. And for the longest of time, the NFC North has been ruled by the Packers. And the Lions know too well that it is difficult to get a win at Lambeau Field. So we'll see if they can do it this Sunday. But it's certainly is exciting. Again, unfortunately, the way things have worked out, you're kind of counting on the Rams to beat the Seahawks to give you a playoff chance. But stranger things have happened. So I don't want it to be doom and gloom, but I do want to recognize the fact that, yes, there's still quite a bit to play for, I think, for the Lions, even if the Rams should lose. But unfortunately, the playoff portion of their hopes and dreams is dependent on the Rams, which not the greatest, not the greatest. But maybe they'll pay it forward and get the win against the Seahawks since the Matt Stafford trade in the Super Bowl. Maybe karma will be there for the Lions fans. Again, I think what they've done this season, I think it doesn't make up for the fact that they wouldn't make the playoffs. It's not like I'd want that, one or the other, but I think it does. It makes missing the playoffs a little bit more palatable because you've seen certainly a change in this team. And certainly, I think they have a very high ceiling heading into the next season. And sort of excited to see what the front office can do to add talent to this team and really go for it in the 2023 season. So I'm excited. Again, whether they make the playoffs or not, I think it should be a very exciting game. I like the Lions in it, but we'll talk more about that on the pregame episode. Until then, which will be next Sunday, I'm Kevin Marhini. This has been the Lions Grid coming to you live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please do help the channel grow, giving us a like, follow, or subscribe on any of those channels, whichever one is your favorite. Certainly does help us out, and we appreciate you taking the time, whether you're here live with us or if you're watching a recording. It means a lot. And yeah, appreciate you. We'll catch you during the next episode. I'm Kevin Marhini. This has been the Lions Grid. Boy.